So I got my Bulbasaur shirt on. I got my hat backwards because I'm basically Ash Ketchum, right? Because today we're going to talk about Pokemon. So in September in review, I talked a little bit about how I put I hit the pause button on a Japanese game series from last year, Nihon no Konyo Shokai, and I've just been hoarding Japanese games nonstop since then, thinking I would, come back and do like a full season on it, and it just takes too much time to make those episodes. So I had a bunch of Pokemon games that were part of that, and I was going to make a Pokemon episode, but I'm kind of breaking the rule now. I've gotten some other non-Japanese Pokemon games, so instead of doing some Pokemon games like in September in review, and then some more in the future in like multiple episodes, I said, you know what, why not? Let's just talk about all the Pokemon games that I've gotten in the past year plus, and just chat about them. So I think I'm going to label this one as a Nihon no Konyo Shokai episode, but we're just going to kind of talk about Japanese games whenever now, and if the series ever comes back in full, we'll get there, but we're just having fun. So we got a whole bunch of Japanese games, so we're going to get right into it. First we're going to talk about first three we're going to talk about are actually quite interesting because they are not normal console Pokemon games, and by that I mean they are PC Pokemon games. So the very first one is, we're going to start off with a bang here. This is the Pokemon Gold and Silver internet browser, also the Mario Tennis internet browser. So I looked a little bit into this because this was really weird. I had seen it before. I think I heard about it on like Did You Know Gaming, and I just had to buy it, so I ended up buying a sealed copy. So it was released in 2000. It's an Internet Explorer 5 themed web browser. I'm also one of the last few people to ever use Internet Explorer. I used it up until through like at least my first year at college. But this was a browser that was running Internet Explorer 5, but obviously themed as Pokemon, or you could choose to use Mario Tennis. So to get this, one, you could get it online for totally free in 2000. You could have just downloaded it, but you could have also ordered a physical version of it for free. So I don't know who did that. I didn't even hear about this until like a year or so ago. And it's just very interesting, and it's especially very interesting that you could find them sealed now. Even non-sealed ones were pretty expensive, so I think the difference was like $20 between sealed and non-sealed, so I was like, why not? I might as well just get it sealed. I actually also bought it from on eBay from a store that goes to like conventions a lot, so I mean, it was a little comfortable buying it from that. But it's not the point. But among the things you could do in specifically the Pokemon browser is there were links to the websites for games that were released around that time. So obviously Gold and Silver is one, so the Gold and Silver website you can go to. Pokemon Stadium 1 you could go to. The Pokemon trading card game, Game Boy Color game, you could also access that website. And Pokemon Snap, which was another Nintendo 64 game where you take pictures of Pokemon. So it was kind of interesting of like things you could do in it, aside from it just being themed. But also there was a video player specifically for playing advertisements about games that were coming out or movies that were coming out. Specifically, Bulbapedia mentions that the ad for Pokemon the Movie 2000 was in it. So that's kind of funny, kind of interesting. So very weird piece of Pokemon history that we're going to start with. And we got a lot of games, so we got to get moving. Next one is another weird set of PC games. Only other two PC games, but it's a Pokemon Gotta Make 'em All red version and blue version. So going along with the idea that Pokemon's always released in two separate versions, right? Pokemon Red and Blue originally, Gold and Silver, for example, Red and Blue here, and all these games are just studio games. So you can make Pokemon cards, you can make stickers. It says keychains, certificates, signs, tattoos, and more. I don't know how effective some of these things were, but they were released in versions because only 81 Pokemon were here, so if you wanted to use all of the graphics available, you needed to have both. So that's very, very interesting. Weird concept, of course, very early Pokemon. For them to try something like this would, it obviously would not require a disc now, but it would not be the same. Now you probably have to pay a lot of money to do something like that. But of course, the idea of making Pokemon cards like in the what year is this? Does that have a year? In 1999 would be like really, really cool. If I had a computer to run these appropriately, I would probably do all sorts of things like making my own Pokemon cards, because that would be a lot of fun. But I can only imagine you can't make like official looking ones, at least for the time. So even though I'm nostalgic for that, I'm probably not going to put in the time to do that. But still, another very interesting piece of Pokemon history. So we continue. The next one is Pokemon Pinball, Ruby and Sapphire. So actually getting into some of the Japanese games I got. This is one of them. So Pokemon Pinball was a Game Boy Color game released for the Game Boy Color in the late 90s, where it was a pinball game, but it had a battery pack at the top of the cartridge. So it was like this bigger cartridge, not like your normal, Game Boy Color cartridge. It was big in a compartment for a battery, so you could get rumble out of the pack when you were playing pinball, which is really, really interesting. My version of it, the rumble still does work. I think some of them are starting to die, just like not working anymore, even with the battery, but I could be totally wrong about that. But still pretty cool. So it's sequel, and as far as I know, its only other console sequel is Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire. Of course, released around the time of Ruby and Sapphire in early Game Boy Advance era. So that's pretty cool. The concept is still the same. Your whole goal in Ruby and Sapphire is that you are collecting Pokemon. So there's a Ruby field, there's a Sapphire field, like just different maps with different functionalities. And I think if you go over a certain Pokemon or you hit a certain Pokemon, you capture it, which is really, really interesting of a concept. So that's pretty cool, pretty neat, good concept. But I don't think we'll ever see anything like this again, at least not on a a full release. Maybe we see something like that as like a small eShop game, but I don't think that's the Pokemon Company's number one thing right now. So that's pretty cool. Moving past the Game Boy Advance, we get into the GameCube, which there was only a handful of Pokemon things released on GameCube. Colosseum, XD Gale of Darkness, Pokemon Channel, which I've talked about at some point in the past on this channel. But one thing that is very interesting about Pokemon Colosseum is that in both North America and Japan, if you pre-ordered the game, you got pre-order bonus discs. So I have 2 of them. They came just like this, and they are actually different. I don't have 2 of the exact same. So let me take each one out and be super careful here. But the big function of the bonus discs were to get Celebi to get Celebi into the Gen 3 games via Colosseum. So in North America, the pre-order bonus disc for, I believe it was Jirachi, you could just get Jirachi. You just put the disc in your GameCube, connect your Game Boy Advance to your GameCube, and you just get Jirachi that way. So it's a really expensive bonus disc. It's at least $100, probably at least $120, $150 at this point. So very hard to get, and I happened to come across 2 of the Japanese ones. But in Japan, you also had to play through the game. You needed a copy of Colosseum to be able to do this. So I think you would download it to your memory card and then download it to Colosseum, and then you get Celebi from Colosseum into your Game Boy Advance, at least again in Japan. Now there's 2 different versions of this, and I had a hard time finding how they were different until I did some very, very quick research just before this video. So one of these, this one is model number PCKJ, and I got my notes here. So the PCKJ pre-order bonus disc is the Kakucho bonus disc, which essentially it just had an extra demo of Pokemon Channel. Pokemon Channel was like a TV-based Pokemon game, also released for the GameCube in North America and in Japan, except Japan got a sequel to it. So that's kind of cool that it's not only just this way to get Celebi, but also a bonus a bonus demo for a game that would eventually be coming out. So a little bit of marketing along with the distribution. So that was PCKJ, and then there was also the PCSJ disc. And like I said, could not find the difference between them until I was like, okay, time to actually figure out what the difference is. So the PCSJ disc, again, also contains Celebi, but instead of a demo for Pokemon Channel, it instead had demos or at least videos of Game Boy Advance games that were releasing, specifically PCSJ. The disc is titled the Nintendo Tokusei disc version, or the version of this bonus disc. Again, last one was Kakucho, and this one is Nintendo Tokusei. So that's pretty interesting. That same concept, same distribution, I believe. I think they were both pre-order bonuses, so I'm not sure what the difference is between them as to how you would get one or the other. But it is still very, very interesting that they're both just marketing employees at the end of the day, and even weirder that I came across both of them. So there was a seller that in the spring. This is how I end up getting a lot of Japanese games. There's a seller who just has really cheap listings on eBay, and I just put up cheap bids. And when nobody knows about these sellers, I win these auctions really at really cheap costs, right? Like I said, North American bonus disc is $120, $150, a lot of money, but those I think I got for like $40 a piece, which is really, really cheap. So very weird, but cool history behind them. Cool variant history behind them too. So that's those are the bonus disc. Next up, we have a bunch of DS and 3DS Pokemon games. So I'm going to go through them kind of quick. First two are going to be mainline Pokemon for DS, and then we'll go through some of the spin-offs that I got for the DS. So mostly Japanese from here on out. Mostly Japanese. First one, Pokemon Heart Gold, the specific big box edition that came with the Pokewalker. I don't have the Pokewalker, it didn't come with it, but I can get a Pokewalker like on eBay for $50 whenever I decide to actually complete this. Heart Gold is a remake of Pokemon Gold, and its counterpart Soul Silver would have been the remake for Pokemon Silver on DS. And I have this game, and I've played Heart Gold a handful of times, and Soul Silver a handful of times, and they are fantastic. So Diamond and Pearl came out, then Platinum came out, and Heart Gold, Soul Silver were the last mainline Pokemon games released on the DS. And I never played Gen 2 growing up. I watched the anime through Gen 2. I collected Pokemon cards through Gen 2, but I never had an opportunity to play Gold and Silver. So playing it this way for the first time was excellent because they are excellent games. These are definitely considered one of the best games in the entire Pokemon series, period. Not only the fact that it's a remake, just a really well done remake. So these games are ridiculously expensive. But it is cool to get the big box version of this. In English, the big box version is like $300. So I did not pay nearly that much for the Japanese version, but still incredibly cool nonetheless. Well, if there's any game that can rival the cost of Pokemon Heart Gold, at least loose or its regular box copy, it would be Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. So I also got White 2 in Japanese. So I recently played through Gen 5. I believe I was talking about it in a video not that long ago, probably about a month ago at this point. But Gen 5 is beautiful. So wait, actually, what did I just say? Did I just say Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the last one was released on DS? That's a lie, because Black, White, Black 2, White 2 came out. But yeah, growing up, I didn't play Gen 5. I kind of stopped on Pokemon after that. And now, as an adult, I've gone back to playing Gen 5. And I have to say, Gen 5 games are masterpieces. I'm so serious. Heart Gold, Soul Silver did so much right. They look so good. Black, White, Black 2, White 2 just take several steps up. So, Game Freak really was like pushing the limits on what they could do with Gen 5. And it was, these games are expensive now, and it's well worth it because these games are fantastic. I would definitely replay Gen 5 if I had the time. I just played through it. I don't really have a need to play through it right now, but now I'm not so scared of Gen 5. But yeah, maybe we'll come back to Gen 6 a little bit later in the video. So we'll get through some Pokemon spin-offs on the DS era. So let's do that. So the first one is Pokemon Dash, again in Japanese. The next 4 after this one are in Japanese. But this is literally just a racing game for Pokemon. You are controlling Pikachu in different racing events. But what's most interesting about this game is that it's the first Pokemon game released on DS. So including spin-offs, not just mainline, this is the first DS Pokemon game, which is actually pretty interesting. So, I mean, that's kind of the neatest history behind it. Most people don't know anything about Pokemon Dash because it's kind of obscure. Everybody wants to talk about Diamond and Pearl when you talk about Gen 5. Oh, sorry, DS Pokemon games. So there you go. Also interesting about this is that it's predominantly Gen 1 through 3 Pokemon, but there's also Munchlax, which was, I think, the first time a Gen 4 Pokemon game was in a Pokemon game, period. So Munchlax is technically Gen 4, but did appear in Pokemon Dash before the release of Diamond and Pearl. The next 3 are all Pokemon spin-offs. They're all part of the Pokemon Fushigi no Dungeon games, or better known as Mystery Dungeon. So if you've seen videos before, I've talked about Shiren the Wanderer, which is another spin-off of Mystery Dungeon. So Mystery Dungeon originally is a drawn a blank, kind of like a dungeon crawling RPG series that originally began, I believe, with Dragon Quest characters on the PS1, but it has expanded way further than that into like the Shiren the Wanderer series, which has like mild interest here in North America, but very, very popular in Japan. And so the overarching Mystery Dungeon genre did come into Pokemon with some of these games. So the first one I have here is Pokemon Fushigi no Dungeon Ao no Kyujotai. I think I got that right. Or better known as Blue Rescue Team here in North America. And it's actually pretty interesting because Pokemon games like to come in pairs. We've talked about that so many times, even if Pokemon Dash didn't come in a pair, right? But so this is Blue Rescue Team. There was also a Pokemon Red Rescue Team, but it wasn't released on DS. It was released on the Game Boy Advance. Now, here's what's really interesting. If you ever played Diamond and Pearl, or Platinum specifically, there is a way for you to connect your Game Boy Advance Pokemon games to your DS Pokemon games. So the GBA game would go at the bottom of the DS game would go at the top. So here's what's really cool. In this artwork for Blue Rescue Team, they are looking down into a hole. But in the artwork for Red Rescue Team, the Game Boy Advance game, they are looking up. So it's kind of like the Game Boy Advance cartridge looking up, DS cartridge looking down at each other. So that's a really, really nice piece of detail for Pokemon games to do, especially artwork and connectivity, right? DS was like this era of super connectivity between all sorts of different games. So that's a really, really cool, neat piece of history. But the Mystery Dungeon series didn't stop there for Pokemon, because they also had 3 Explorers titles. So this first one, also Pokemon Fushigi no Dungeon. This one, Toki no Tankentai, or what is the name of this game again? Pokemon Explorers of Time. I forgot to write it down. So there were 3 Explorers games, Pokemon Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky. Here's Darkness, Pokemon Fushigi no Dungeon, Yami no Tankentai. So I know Yami is Darkness from Yu-Gi-Oh! I actually know that part. So these 2, I believe, were released at the same time. I could be wrong. But then, kind of like Pokemon likes to do third versions, like better versions of these games, there was Explorers of Sky, released I think a few years later. So at the time, Diamond and Pearl were released, and then Pokemon Platinum came out, and then at some point, Explorers of Sky came out as an updated version of these 2 games. So I probably would never play these games in English if I'm being super honest, but it is still very cool, as I'm dropping these games, to at least play them, to at least have them in Japanese, just as a collecting Pokemon piece. So there's that. 2 more DS games as I clean up my mess over here. The next one is kind of like Dash. There's not really a whole lot to say about it, but this is Pokemon Torose, or better known as Pokemon Troze here in North America. And honestly, it's just a puzzle game. So it's closest to Yoshi's Cookie, if you've ever played Yoshi's Cookie, where not just like Tetris, where blocks are falling down. These games, the blocks are shaped like Pokemon, so that's a nice piece of detail too. But you can also move pieces beyond just like shifting them left and right. Like you can like flip pieces, and your goal is still to clear matching pieces. So I like Tetris a lot. I never really got behind Yoshi's Cookie, but it is cool to at least have a Pokemon game that is of the same idea. Just looking at the back, there's a lot of different Pokemon, so at least it's not like like not just colors. They have the detail to put Pokemon in there too. So another weird spin-off to get, but that was sort of like the DS's game. You know, there was some Pokemon spin-offs on consoles before that, like Pokemon TCG on Game Boy Color, Pokemon Pinball on Game Boy Color, drawing a blank as to GBA ones, but like Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire. But DS went ballistic, right? I've already shown what 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, and why not? Let's do one more. Pokemon Conquest, which is the only one, only North American DS Pokemon game I got in within the past year. I actually got this one like in this past week. So a guy on Facebook Marketplace had a loose copy of this along with 2 other games that we're going to show in a little bit. And so I got the loose copy for a pretty good price and then proceeded to buy the box so that I have a nice complete copy. So ended up paying overall less than what it would cost to buy it alone. Not that it's about the money, but, cool to get a nice complete version. Now, Pokemon Conquest is very interesting because it's a crossover with a series called Nobunaga's Ambition, which is a turn-based RPG series that initially started on like Japanese PCs a long time ago. I'm familiar with the name because I believe there was a game released on the NES that would come into the game store a lot. So I was familiar with that, but I believe that Pokemon Conquest is the first time Nobunaga's Ambition ever crossed over with any other series. So for Pokemon to be the first is very, very interesting. So kind of interesting, very like warrior-based, like almost military-based, war-based, which is kind of cool that Pokemon can be involved with something like that, but definitely not the kind of place you would expect Pokemon to be. So any kid who was like, oh, I want a Pokemon game, and then their parents end up getting this for them, I can imagine that their view on Pokemon is very different than those of us that played Pokemon games, like the mainline ones growing up. So kind of weird. That's it for DS games. We're getting into 3DS games, so let's get right into that. I don't need to go super crazy about the 3DS games, at least these first few. So we'll do these 5 kind of in rapid order. We have Pokemon X and Pokemon Y, both in Japanese. So, like I said, I didn't play Gen 5 growing up, so I also didn't play Gen 6. X and Y are Gen 6. But now that I finished Gen 5, I'm playing a little bit of Gen 4, just kind of doing some things, going back in time a little bit, getting through those games kind of quick because I know Gen 4 really well. But after Gen 4, I'm definitely getting into X and Y. In English, at the very least, because at some point in 2025, we are getting Pokemon Legends ZA, so X, Y, and this is going to be ZA. So that'll be that'll be super interesting. It says release in 2025. Doesn't have a date. We haven't heard any news since it was initially announced, so we have no idea when we're getting this Legends game. But if I have to guess, I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking a game on the Switch's successor, right? We don't need to have a video here about the Switch's successor, but I would not be surprised if 2025 was just a nice way of saying, oh yeah, it's coming like November 2025. It's like, can't imagine we're already getting a new generation of Pokemon after Gen 9, and Gen 9 may or may not appear in this video. So yeah. Interesting for that, but I definitely do got to play Gen 6 in the nearest future, definitely before Legends ZA comes out, because I need the backstory. But also, now that I know Gen 5, I feel like I can play Gen 6. So, just throwing that out there. After Gen 6 came Gen 7, and after Gen 6, before Gen 7, came spin-offs, remakes for Gen 3. So, normally we get, like, it was Red and Blue got Yellow, and Gold and Silver got Crystal. Ruby Sapphire got Emerald. Diamond Pearl got Platinum. So you would expect that at some point X and Y would have gotten like updated versions, and they never did, which is kind of like a little bit of rumor history about like about Pokemon Z. But instead of getting a Pokemon Z, we instead got remakes for Gen 3. Specifically, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I don't have Alpha Sapphire, but I do have Pokemon Omega Ruby. So Gen 3 I'm not fond of at all. If you saw the Pokemon as an adult video, I'm not super fond of Gen 3. So I would play this just to say I played through the remakes once, but I probably would not go out of my way to spend a whole lot of time with it. But again, just collecting it for the shelf. I do have Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire in English, but I'm a collector, so I have to buy these games in Japanese too, right? So there's Omega Ruby. Technically the end to Gen 6. And then before we got to the Switch, we had Gen 7. Gen 7 was Pokemon Sun and Moon. And then they had updated versions, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, which I don't have, but I do have Sun and Moon. And the really cool thing about these is that when I bought these, got them from the same seller, probably in like the same day's worth of auctions, and they both came with promo Snorlax cards, like still intact with like this like sleeve thing that it was already in. And so kind of weird that both of them have the extra Snorlax. There it is for Pokemon Moon 2. So very, very neat way to not just get Sun and Moon, but also get like Sun and Moon how it was like originally released, which is very neat to me. So yeah, Sun and Moon. Also got to play Gen 7, but we got to get through Gen 6 first. So there's most of the 3DS games. The last three are, again, spin-off games, right? We did DS Mainline and then DS spin-off, and then we did 3DS Mainline and now 3DS spin-off. And the next three are really, really interesting because it was an attempt on Pokemon's part to get into like the Toys to Life craze. So for example, like Skylanders and Amiibo. So Pokemon had Rumble, and they didn't work nearly as well. They are turn-based RPG games that I'm pretty sure you could use the toys on 3DS games. If not the toys, definitely on the Wii U. I have to imagine they were on the they could work on the 3DS, but I never played them. And they're more just like, I bought them because they're Pokemon games. So the first one is Pokemon Rumble World. So to talk a little bit more about Pokemon Rumble, it was originally a WiiWare title, so not physically released, but released on like the Wii eShop, what would be at the time. And you play as like these wind-up toys in a turn-based system, kind of, right? Do I have that right? Hold on. Yeah, turn-based RPGs based on some toys. So, it had two 3DS games. It had this one, Rumble World, and then also Rumble Blast, which we also may or may not have gotten in Japan too. So I don't have Rumble World in Japanese, but I do have Pokemon Rumble Blast and Super Pokemon Scramble. Very different from Pokemon Rumble Blast, but same concept for both of them. They faded into obscurity because the toys didn't really work out. I don't even know what the Rumble toys go for now. I have to imagine because they're Pokemon, they go for a lot, even if they are absolutely not usable for modern games. So this whole Rumble series kind of fell into obscurity, but I do believe there was a Wii U eShop title, and then I think there was also a mobile game released in 2019. I couldn't even tell you if that game is still active because I don't hear anybody ever talk about Pokemon Rumble ever. So again, another strange piece of Pokemon history. We are nearing the end here, but the next one is another interesting Pokemon spinoff, the only one on Wii U, I believe. Pokken Tournament. So Pokken Tournament is a crossover between Pokemon and the series Tekken, which is a fighting series. So you can only imagine that Pokken Tournament is Tekken, a fighting game with Pokemon. That's it. I never played Tekken. I couldn't even get this far in Pokken Tournament, even in English. I don't really get it. I'm not really good at fighting games to begin with. My brain is too small to be good at that. But Pokken Tournament, just have it in Japanese now. But what's actually really interesting about Pokken Tournament, not that it has anything to do with me having a Japanese copy of it, but in German, in North America, it's called Pokemon Tournament. In Japan, it's known as... Wait, what did I say? In English, it is Pokken Tournament. In Japanese, it's Pokken Tournament. But in Germany, for some reason, it is Pokemon Tournament. That's the name of the release, Pokemon Tournament. So that is very odd. So at some point, I would like to get that German release specifically because it is just a weird variant to all the other ones. At some point, I knew the answer as to why it's called Pokemon Tournament. Pokken, I think, it's too similar to a word in German, so that they had to change it, but still kind of interesting. So I definitely do want to get that at some point. Okay. After the 3DS came the Wii U, and after the Wii U came the Switch, and we got 4 Switch games here, and then that'll be it. So first 2 would be Detective Pikachu Returns, and I say first 2 because Also got it in Japanese. This game was released, I think, just last year. It's a sequel to the original Detective Pikachu game on 3DS, which is kind of a different concept to a Pokemon game, right? You are Detective Pikachu as opposed to like mainline Pokemon. Still a spinoff, but probably the closest you can get to regular Pokemon, my guess. But also had a movie released, Detective Pikachu, with I think like Ryan Reynolds a while ago. In the time that Detective Pikachu on 3DS, in the time I even had a 3DS, in the time I was even into Pokemon, like during that big gap, I never saw Detective Pikachu because I was like, Pokemon's a thing of the past for me. But of course now I need to see it because I'm a grown adult that's loving Pokemon again. But yeah, when this was released, I was able to find a Japanese copy for not full price. So I was like, all right, might as well get it at the same time. So Detective Pikachu returns. Probably never going to play it, but at least I have it. And that brings us to the very end of the video with one more set of games. Really good way to end this because they're the last major games released until we get Pokemon Legends ZA in 2025. But for now, I got back into Pokemon specifically when they announced the Diamond and Pearl remakes on the Switch in 2020. It came out in 2021, I believe, because I think they came out in 2021, and then Legends Arceus came out in January 2022, and then Scarlet and Violet were released in 2022. So that's when I first got a Switch, when I heard of like the remakes coming out and Legends coming out, and then of course my first Pokemon game back is Gen 9. So we also got the Gen 9 Pokemon games, Scarlet and Violet, in Japanese because they are Japanese Pokemon games. But yeah, if I was going to get any Japanese Pokemon games, it would definitely have to be Gen 9 because if you saw the Pokemon as an adult video, they're the first games I played coming back to the series. So they are a little special to me. And all of their flaws, all of their graphical flaws, I do really, really love Scarlet and Violet. I'm being super honest. So yeah, now I have those two. But haven't played Scarlet and Violet in a while. They haven't had any major events since the DLC last year. Was it already last year? I think, was it like one wave was around Christmas and the other wave was like February? I could be totally wrong about that. Maybe it was a little bit earlier than that. But there were waves to the DLC a while ago. But since then, there hasn't been anything in Scarlet and Violet worth doing. I would love if they just added Pokemon that aren't in the game to like Terra raids, difficult Pokemon to beat, but still something different. But I think everything in Scarlet and Violet has gone pretty cold for one reason or another. So, with that said, those are all the Pokemon games I got in the past year-ish. It's a lot. Most of them were... I don't think a lot of them were part of like the original Japanese haul that I had, where I originally started Nihon no Konyo Henshokai, but a lot of them came in the spring when I was on eBay auctions, of course, naturally, and then some of them just got otherwise. So like I said, that's everything. If I got anything wrong about these games, I'm usually pretty confident in my Pokemon knowledge, but I probably messed something up somewhere along the way. So if I said anything wrong, please correct me. I want to learn about these games as much as I have hopefully taught you something. And with that said, bye.